crossing that finish line and getting that medal is something that I felt very proud of in the end because of the strength it took mentally, emotionally, and physically to actually get to that finish line. I knew going into that race it was going to be hard. This was a totally different kind of hard. This was not something that I had anticipated. I anticipated what those first 1 through 17 and a half miles were going to feel like. I anticipated that from the taper week that I had, from how sick I was that week, that this was going to be a hard race. And marathons are hard to begin with, let alone when you have other obstacles outside of your control that you're trying to overcome. But this was not the hard that I was expecting. This was a totally different mental barrier of hard for me. What up, world? And welcome back to another episode of the Seeds of Success podcast. Today we're doing the Eugene Marathon recap. This is something that I kind of wish I would have did it right away after the race. Quite frankly, I was extremely exhausted and tired and hurt when the marathon ended, and I wanted to just enjoy that evening with Shelby. Next thing you know, I was in a car driving back up to Gig Harbor, my hometown, for 4 hours that next morning. Then a week at home with the family, set some things back from the podcast standpoint. And so here we are, about, a week and 2-3 days out from the Eugene Marathon. And it is now time to recap this thing. The Eugene Marathon is interesting. This is something that I had been training for since I started running again, which was basically in the January timeframe. 2022 was chalked up to setbacks from a physical standpoint: plantar fasciitis, shin splints, foot issues, this thing, that thing. I was bottled up trying to recover and get back into running. I literally didn't do a race the entire 2022 season. I got myself to a point through rehab, through PT, through chiropractic work, through strength training in the gym, through the bike, through doing anything and everything that I could, ripping the stair stepper, right? 2022 was doing whatever I could to maintain fitness, to maintain being in shape and having endurance and continuing to get stronger while recovering to get to a point where I could run again was the ultimate goal. Knowing that I had the Eugene Marathon coming up this year, April 30th of 2023. And so after a lot of work last year and very intentional and specific rehab work and PT work, I got to a point where it was go time and I was ready to begin training once again. And so my coach, he brought up an interesting point. 4.5 months ago, we were literally standing in the PT office trying to figure out how to effectively get back to running. And because I got started with training, then knee issue came up, but we worked through it and we battled through. And so 4+ months of very specific marathon training is what the start of 2023 looked like. And I was really excited for the Eugene Marathon. I felt like things were going well. I had a really solid training run, to test myself with a 15-miler a couple weeks prior to Eugene. And I was feeling really good going into taper week. And for those that didn't listen to the previous podcast and don't exactly know what happened, I'm still trying to figure that out. But long story short is that Sunday night of taper week, I came down with some sort of very severe stomach flu and some sort of virus to where I woke up and was throwing up for 2 days. I was shaking. I had body aches. There was a point in time where I couldn't get from the carpet of our house up onto the couch where I was just trying to get to lay down. And I don't know what happened. I have no rhyme or reason. We think that we just got some stomach flu. Shelby dealt with the same thing a couple days later. and I lost 10 pounds. I couldn't keep food in, couldn't keep calories in. And I had a race coming up in 6 days at that point. This was Monday, Tuesday. I literally took off of work Monday, Tuesday, got back into work Wednesday, and it was a rough go, but it was, and then we had diarrhea for 3 days, and then it was trying to figure out how to run again. Legs wouldn't turn over. Legs felt like 1,000 pounds. It was not how I had envisioned taper week going. And so Saturday rolls around, Eugene Marathon hits on Sunday, and let's see, the first mile, the gun went off, and I knew that I was going to be in for a long day. I did not feel like I had the juice in my legs. I did not feel what I was expecting to feel like coming into that race, which was I was anticipating feeling good, feeling fresh, feeling ready to go. And my legs felt dead. I felt heavy. It felt like I had lost 10 pounds that week, and it felt like I had been throwing up for that week is how it felt, honestly. But it didn't stop me. It was basically like the first mile hit, and I knew that I was going to be in for it. However, I knew that I could also do it, is the thing. So it was literally like typically how, races go for me is like, miles 1 through 3 are hard, like getting into the flow of things. But then like miles 7, 8, 9, 10 through 15, like I'm typically feeling pretty good. I get better as races go on. This was not the case. This was hard from mile 1. And it was basically just get to the next mile is how I was thinking about it. I was like, dude, we got to mile 3. Now just hang on and let's get to mile 4. We got to mile 4. Now let's hang on and get to mile 5. There was 1 mile, I think like mile 7 is what it was, where I felt good. And by good, I mean, like, I didn't really think that I was like running at that point in time. I got kind of forgotten about it. I don't know. Like, I think the crowd was pretty involved at that point, and I just was feeling a little better. But man, miles 1 through 11, pretty tough. I knew it was going to be a tough day, and the thought of doing 26 miles seemed pretty daunting in my head, but I knew that I could do it. And I knew that I had done the training up to that point. I was thinking about all the early mornings. I was thinking about the 2-a-days. I was thinking about all of everything that it took to get to that point. And I wasn't going to let that deter me from continuing to move forward, because I was still on pace. Like, I was still hitting my pace. I was still hitting the numbers. And, I was quite honestly surprising myself a little bit. I was like, okay, and I kept building that confidence. So like, all right, there's another mile clipped at pace. Here we go. And I was, and so I was feeling good. And then mile 11, I felt something going on in my left glute hip area. I didn't know what it was. I had not felt it before. And this was something that I did feel on the right side at one point during a training run, but I had never felt it on the left side. And during that training run, the right side had just gone away, but the left side was there to stay. Mile 12 hit, got a little worse. Mile 13 hit, and I started thinking, wow, this thing is still ripping, and it is getting a little bit more severe. It was fine. I was able to manage it at that point in time. And then mile 15 rolls around, and I'm starting to hurt pretty good. And I start thinking to myself, wow, I still have 11 miles to go with this going on at this speed. I started having my doubts for better or worse, obviously for worse in the end. But then funny enough, there's Kat Thompson, CEO of BPN, right behind me. And I turn around and yell her name, and she comes running up to me. And because I had seen Jeff Galloway running around, and so I knew that she had to be around. I knew that Kat was running this race. For those that don't know, I'm a BPN ambassador, and I knew that Kat was going to be running this race. And so she buddies up, and we have and we start running together for a couple miles. And those were arguably the hardest miles that I was running at that point. I was really trying to grit my way through it. And I got to a point where my body started slowing, and my legs started slowing. This thing was hurting. And it was this left hip thing, and I was questioning how I was going to keep going. And so Kat took off. I started slowing down, and I got to the point where I could not take another step because I felt like with every step, I felt like my hip was going to come out of the socket. I felt like it was going to rip. I felt like I just hadn't experienced this before, and it was something I could not run through at that moment in time. It hurt so bad, and I literally stopped. I have not stopped in a training run ever. I have not stopped in a race ever. And I stopped. And in that moment, I had a lot of emotions flooding through me because I was still on pace, and I was like, okay, let me just like see if I could stretch this thing out. I tried stretching, and then I took 2 more steps, and my hip, I don't even know how to describe it, but the entire hip it just seized. It was shooting sharp pains, just riveting my left hip. And I literally couldn't take a step, and it hurt so bad. And so I didn't know what else to do. I didn't know how I was going to finish this thing. I didn't know how I was going to I was at mile 17 and a half when this happened. And I'm like, how the hell am I going to get to mile 18 right now? Is what I was honestly thinking, let alone how am I going to get to the finish line? One of the things I started thinking about is I'm like, okay, well, you know what? Like maybe I could still hit a sub 3. Next thing I know, there goes the sub 3 pacer running by me. And I'm a little bent over on the course at this point. Like I didn't know, I couldn't take a step. And basically the next 8 miles was me trying to figure out how I was going to get to the next mile marker. It was a series of walk 10 steps, stop because of the excruciating pain, stretch, swing my leg, anything that would take the pain away, I was doing. Some race trail angel gave me a bottle with some salt tabs and some Noon electrolytes to try to help. And so I carried that the entire way. And it was a brutal last 8 miles, the hardest 8 miles that I can ever remember up to this point in my running career, mentally, emotionally. Like there was a lot of thoughts going on, you know. It was like, yeah, you have this goal that you've been working so hard towards, and you had this vision of what this day was going to be, and it's all folding right before your eyes and right under your feet. And it felt like there was nothing that I could do physically to continue moving forward towards that goal. And it was frustrating, and it was a bummer. Honestly, it felt like just a big freaking bummer is how I was feeling about it in that moment in time. And then I had, a couple breakdowns here and there, and continued to move forward through it and continue just to figure out, okay, how can I get to the next quarter mile mark? All right. How can I get to the next quarter mile mark? And that is basically what at this point, it was like walk, stop, stretch, try to jog, try to move forward. And it was just this like endless cycle of I felt like the finish line was never going to come. It was so brutal. And then that's when the goal started readjusting, right? It was then starting to realize that, hey, this is not going to happen today. Once the sub 3 went, I was like, all right, you know what? Maybe I can break sub 330. All right, there goes that. Maybe I can try to break my first ever marathon time. There goes that. I'm like, okay, you know what? How can I get to the finish line? And so it was just like adjusting the goals given the circumstances and continuing to refine the mindset about what was possible in those moments for me. And also coming to terms with reality was another experience that I had to overcome. And so I knew going into that race, it was going to be hard. This was a totally different kind of hard. This was not something that I had anticipated. I anticipated what those first 1 through 17 and a half miles were going to feel like. I anticipated that from the taper week that I had, from how sick I was that week, that this was going to be a hard race. And marathons are hard to begin with, let alone when you have other obstacles outside of your control that you're trying to overcome. And so, but this was not the hard that I was expecting. This was a totally different mental barrier of hard for me in these final 8 miles of the race. And so here's is how it finished. I could see Hayward Field Stadium. I could see it. I'm on the road and I'm looking at the freaking stadium that I was looking for so long. Like, where the heck is this thing? And can this race please just be over? And I see it, and I'm on the road that takes you into the stadium. And I stopped 6 times on that road because I literally could not take a step without this hip freaking out on me with just shooting pain down the hip. And I got people telling me like, hey, you're almost there. And I'm like, I know, I see that. Trust me, I'm doing everything that I can to try to get there. And so, gosh, it was a different race. It was a different experience. And it was something that crossing that finish line and getting that medal is something that I felt very proud of in the end, because of the strength it took mentally, emotionally, and physically to actually get to that finish line. Was it how I envisioned coming into Hayward Field and finishing in this incredible stadium, running the sub 255 like I was hoping for and training towards? No, it wasn't, but it was a different type of feeling, one that I was just pretty damn proud to have gotten myself to that point and pushed through some very uncomfortable barriers. And so that's basically how the race went. And then it was, I saw Bronte and Max, some of our friends who were out there supporting us at the finish line, chatted with them for a bit. And then I went and got my bag from the bag drop off and laid on the grass and sat there for so long I couldn't get myself to move. And then went and met up with Shelby and her mom was out there supporting us on the course. It was so awesome to see people on the course and have a support team. And my coach was out there getting videos and taking pictures. And we had some other friends, Zach and Ben out there, and Lex, who was out on the course, and Sam, who crushed it, and Shelby, who obviously crushed it, even given her circumstances, who she had her own issues physically going on Friday and Saturday and couldn't even run. And she qualified for Boston running a 3:14 under some dire circumstances of her own. And so it was honestly still pretty cool to just have gone through that experience. And when I think about race day, I still think about it just as an exciting feeling. I love race day. I love race environments. I in preparation for this podcast, I was going back through and watching videos that I had taken and reading the posts that I had made and trying to get, and it just reminded me about how much fun I had during the process of it all. Like, I love the process of it. And so I hope that whatever you do and whatever passions you have and the things that you enjoy spending your time doing, I hope that you just continue to fall more in love with the process of it, because it's the work. It's the 4 or 5 months of the training. It's the all of 2022 to get to this point. It's the decade-long commitment to running that is the real reward for me, at least in this moment. Like, the day, it's not if, but when I cross that finish line sub 3 and sub 255 and qualify for to Boston and actually go to Boston, like, that day will come. It wasn't Eugene Marathon day. That was not the day. That was a different type of day. And I guess at this point in my life, I needed that type of day. And it makes me that much more hungry, though, for the next one and for the next training bout and for the next fight. Because as my man, Brian Ferrati would say, the win is in the work. So there were a lot of wins along this journey. This was not a failure. This was a win in the sense of the work that went into it to get myself to that start line and then to actually cross the finish line too. And so the work isn't done either. And I'm excited for what's still to come. I do want to dive into some takeaways. And so with that, I will go ahead, stop the recording here, and then I will go ahead and talk about some takeaways on the next recording. I'll do a follow-up as to some of my takeaways, some of the key lessons that I learned that I hope you can go and implement in your own ways and use those however you wish, mentally, physically, emotionally, however it means to you. But yeah, so stay tuned for the next episode when I dive into some of the takeaways that I actually had and the lessons that I learned from this race, because there are always takeaways to be had and there are always lessons to be learned, and there were plenty. Thanks for tuning in. Stay tuned for the next episode, and I will see you all here shortly.